All right, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the virtual Apache Pulsar Meetup, Build an Event-Driven Architecture with Apache Pulsar, hosted by StreamNative. We'll be starting in a couple of minutes. We're just waiting for people to sign in. In the meantime, please feel free to use the chat function to let us know where you're calling in from. As mentioned by the team, for attending live today, we'll be giving away a physical copy of the book Apache Pulsar in Action. We'll contact the winner via email after the event is over. While we wait for people to filter in, we'll be launching a poll to help us better understand you and your experience with Pulsar a little bit more. So let me just drop that into the chat just so people are aware of what we're doing when they sign in. And then I'll go ahead and launch that poll. All right, so I will launch the first poll while we wait for people to sign in. All right, let me know in the chat if you can see that. The first question we have is, what is your familiarity with Apache Pulsar? You know, 1, you've heard about it, but that's just about it. 2, you're new to Pulsar and just getting started. 3, maybe you've dabbled here and there with Pulsar. 4, I've been using Pulsar for some time now. Or 5, I am a Pulsar expert. I'll give it a couple of seconds. For anyone joining in, we're doing a poll right now while we wait for people to sign in. All right, we have a good amount of answers coming in. I'll end the poll now since we have 2 more questions for you all. All right, ended the poll, and the results are, that's awesome. We have a bunch of people here that are pretty new to Pulsar, and some who know and have dabbled a little bit in Pulsar, so that's great. Glad to have you all here and to learn. All right, the second poll we're going to launch is, okay, let me know if you all see it. The second poll is, if you're not using Pulsar, what other open source messaging streaming technologies is your organization using? Or maybe if you're already using Pulsar, please let us know in the chat what other technology you're using it with. So I'll quickly run through the options here: Apache ActiveMQ, Apache Kafka, RabbitMQ, Apache RocketMQ, ZeroMQ, NATS, maybe Pulsar and some other technology. Please put it in the chat. I also see some people putting other. Please let us know in the chat what you're using. We would love to know. And I see a couple people saying none. That's good. Hopefully we'll introduce you all to a new technology. I'm gonna go end that poll right now since we have 1 more question that we want to ask you all. All right, sharing the results now. I see we have a good mixture. We have some people that are currently using Kafka, some RabbitMQ, some NATS, and actually a good amount of people that aren't using any. All right.
We're here for the free stuff.
All right, so again, for those just joining in, we'll start in a couple of minutes. We're just waiting for people to sign in. While we wait, we're doing a couple of polls. I'm actually going to do just 1 last poll before we start. And here we go. Here's the last poll before we start with the virtual meetup. What messaging or streaming feature is the most important to your organization? So we have a couple of options here: pub sub, multi-tenancy, connectors, functions, geo replication, schema, tiered storage, topic compaction, protocol handlers, or other. If you have other, please put it in the chat.
Got to be a fan of that other, none, or null. That's always a good one. NA. I like no features, but I'll use it anyway.
All right, I'll end the poll here so you can get started with the meetup now. But first, let me share the results. All right, it seems like a majority of you all see pub sub as the most important feature for your organization, and then a good amount putting other. All right.
All the
Well,
above. We should have put all the above.
oh yeah, we should have put that. That's another option. If it's all the above for you, put it in the chat. We'd love to know that too.
All the features. I want more features.
All right, great. So I think we've given enough time for people to sign in. We'll go ahead and get started with the virtual meetup. Again, good afternoon and good evening to everyone, and welcome to the virtual Apache Pulsar meetup. Build an event-driven architecture with Apache Pulsar, hosted by StreamNative. We are so excited to have you all here joining us virtually. Your speaker for today is Timothy Spann, developer advocate for StreamNative. He has an extensive background in IoT, big data, distributed computing, messaging, and streaming technologies, as well as Java programming. Today, he will give you some insights into the modern data streaming landscape and how Pulsar fits into it. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we start. Please make sure to utilize the Q&A function on the bottom of your screen to submit any questions you have throughout the event. We'll try our best to answer them as they come in. Feel free to also use the chat function for any comments you may have and want to share with everyone. Closed captioning is also available. Just make sure to enable it on the bottom of your screen. This event is being recorded and will be made available to everyone by next week. All right, that's all of the housekeeping items. I'd like to now turn it over to Tim.
Thank you. I wish we were in Princeton, New Jersey, having some pizza. I lined up a pretty good pizza place. Hopefully we'll be in person again soon. Hopefully we'll see what happens. Here's our quick agenda. Please feel free, just like in the real meetups, to go, hey, let's look at something else. Let's stay here. Let's skip it. You know, I'm here to go over these things, but it's interactive as we could be without being at the actual meetup. We're in the welcome phase. We'll do introduction because we see a bunch of people haven't used Pulsar, which is pretty cool. I'm guessing David listed himself as the expert since he did write the book, I hope. If there's someone else that's an expert, that's really cool. If you're not a committer yet, a good time to start. We'll go over the basics, cover some use cases, and I'll show you the simplest possible application you could build in a couple languages. David gave me an idea to play around with C#. C#1 worked. I never used C# on a Mac, but it worked. So I'll show you that demo. We'll go over some resources. Again, we'll do explicit Q&A at the end. But if you got a question before that, keeping my eye out on that screen. Something comes up, I'll try to answer it if it makes sense where I am. Otherwise, we'll look at it later. We also have, like I said, a ringer in the chat. So David might answer that before I even get to look at it. We'll see, depending on what he wants to do there. Mention I'm Tim. If we were in person, I've had these cool stickers, but no virtual stickers right now. Flip stack is just what I call Flink, Pulsar, and sometimes Nifi, sometimes Spark, some other Apache projects that work really well together. I'm very happy on the apps you could build just using those, you know, major application systems using sometimes no code, low code, maybe Python, maybe Java, Scala, lots of language options there. Done streaming systems and different data architecture for a little while here, touching a bunch of different technology. Worked at a bunch of interesting companies, most recently Cloudera, covering Nifi, Flink, and some other things. So let's get into it. Where I'm working now, StreamNative, pretty awesome place. Founded by the original developers of Apache Pulsar over at Yahoo. Really cool bunch of people. If you're looking for a job, or hiring some more people, just starting to grow here, trying to make Pulsar the best platform we can. So if you have suggestions, have things that maybe you think we should add, let us know. We're definitely in that phase of the project where we're looking for suggestions and ideas. So feel free to reach out. We have a cloud to run things. I'll walk you through how simple it is just to run this on your own. I'm running this on an old used server that I bought, but you can run it on Docker, run it on little Kubernetes, even if you're running it just on your computer, spin it up in your own cloud. There's an easy way to do that in most of the clouds and a lot of different tools to make that easy for you. But StreamNative does it for you. So then there's, we'll show you later, you can get a free trial if you're interested. Cloud native, got all that fun Kubernetes in there and helps out my flip stack. We got Flink SQL in there, make it really easy to query these things continuously as these events come into the system. Now, judging by some people who don't have a messaging system, maybe you don't see a need for real-time data yet. Maybe you don't have access to it yet, but the need is there. You know, you have streams of data, whether you're grabbing them now or not. Maybe they're all going to dev null, hopefully not, but you have things like sensors everywhere. Hard to escape these things. They're kind of, you know, everywhere in your house and everywhere in the office, every kind of technology. So you've got logs, you've got sensors, databases, tons of different sources of data, you know, and maybe some are on-prem, maybe are on some in multiple clouds. It's nice here is having that geo replication, so you don't have to try to work that out yourself. I remember a couple of years ago, we tried to write our own. Not a fun place to be. You want to be able to do microservices and not have to worry about how I'm going to message between different languages, different protocols, you know, where things run, doesn't matter. You want to run on Kubernetes because cloud native is kind of important at this point. So whether you're using it today, if not, you probably use it really soon. Getting access to all your customer data, regardless of where it may be, and keeping it for as long as you need to. You don't want to have to worry about, oh, is it over here? Is it going to expire soon? Not really a concern. Apache Pulsar and a high-level overview. There's a couple of features that make it really nice as a great way to do messaging. Having a stateless layer where you can run this. Oh, I'm going to answer that one in a little bit. I saw your question there. The stateless layer, the brokers that deal with communication between clients, they don't do things that they don't need to do. This is nice. Stateless compute is up here, doing the serving, making sure you get those connections done. In the middle, serverless compute, where you write your own functions or use some of those source and sinks to do I/O between different systems. You could have just set some configuration, drop it in there, and any event just goes where it needs to go. Storage, obviously, you better have stateful storage there, because you don't just want non-persistent messaging, which is supported by Pulsar. Most people want it persistent, and that's an option you enable. Bookies are separate from the compute layer, so it's easy to scale these out in a cloud native way. So that's a nice feature there. And beyond the bookies storing your data, as we mentioned with that tiered storage, tier that out to different types of, you know, lower cost storage like S3 or whatever you might be using. Support for different semantics. You know, if you're used to doing Kafka, you know how that streaming works. It's a great paradigm, but it's not the only paradigm. Sometimes you want to do pub sub, where put data in, maybe I want to set it up as a work queue, whoever can get it processes it, or multiple consumers get it. And maybe I only need to get that message there once. Lots of different options there. You don't always want to just use Pulsar. It's nice. You write a new app, use Pulsar. Maybe you can't find a library. Maybe you've got something that already talks some protocol, like this little device here talks MQTT. So instead of having to write some driver that'll fit on this device, let me use the native MQTT on here to communicate to Pulsar, push out messages as they happen, and not have to worry about setting up a gateway or mapping it or having something read it, then send it somewhere else. Just have it send that data to Pulsar, and it doesn't have to know who it's talking to. Great way to take some of those legacy apps and get them into a modern cloud native streaming solution, not have to worry about it. There's a support for a lot of different protocols, and we'll go into that. What's nice is all these features we're talking about, all those features we put in that poll, those are not enhanced features or pay features or, hidden from you. That's all part of the open source Apache project, which is awesome. Just download it, whether you're running it standalone or in Docker, Kubernetes, wherever you might be running it, you get all those features. You just configure them how you want. Again, we mentioned cloud native because, that's how you're probably deploying this. Unified messaging, we say that because I can do those different types of messaging. There's a bunch of them. Guarantee you get your messages. You're not going to lose any. It can be stored as long as you need to. Very resilient system, redundancy by design in there, and scalable. There's some very large users of Pulsar out there, especially in China, that have scaled up to enormous sizes. Again, where I put my friends together, Pulsar and Flink work really well together. Same idea. If you have 1,000 Flink nodes, Pulsar will scale up to be the messaging and streaming to go along with Flink at whatever size you decide to have it there. I don't know, you need the same number of nodes, but that's part of configuration. How much data you want to store, how many clients are accessing it. Decisions you make there once you start scaling out your app. What's kind of cool, David has written the connector from Pulsar to Nifi, which lets Nifi consume and produce messages with Pulsar, just another way to get your data in there. Pulsar instance is cool because sometimes I might have multiple clusters, but I want to think of them as one cluster. Instance lets me access things without having to do too much. Later, I'm going to push that logo down a little bit, trying to escape from the cluster for some reason. Sometimes it's very hard to keep track of when I'm thinking messaging or saying it and saying streaming. There's semantics, and sometimes we're splitting hairs there, how we say it, but there's a pretty good idea what the difference is. RabbitMQ, SQS, that's messaging. Kind of like sending an email, goes to multiple people, that's fine. Maybe it just needs to take some message, or you're just triggering something to run somewhere and you don't care the order of that. You don't care who gets it first. It just has to happen. And that's a great way for communicating asynchronously, maybe just to get work done and distribute it. That is something that Pulsar supports. The other way, which our friends in Kafka have, streaming. I need it in an order. I'm doing things like data ingestion. Maybe it's coming out of a log. Maybe it's coming out of CDC. I want things to happen in a certain order. It's a common use case. So Pulsar supports that as well. Now, when I'm trying to set up my architecture, one thing that's important is to decide, what are the names of things so we're all on the same page. Like today, we're creating a meetup. It's in New Jersey, and we're going to have some data, so I could start naming things. So I built a cluster. I just have one little cluster sitting over in the corner, keeping me warm in this office. So I'm going to create a tenant under that so that I don't get in the way, either security wise or naming wise. I don't have to worry about other people, having to share the same names. So I don't have to go, well, let me try to think of a unique topic name. Well, it's going to be New Jersey -meetup -first meetup -January, and it's this long name. No one wants to do that. So having this multi-tenancy and by design in here makes it really easy to set this system up. So I don't have to have that. You just have something simple. Okay, let me put all the meetups under here. The one in New Jersey gets this namespace. The one in California gets this one. Makes it easy so I don't have to worry about having all the topics in one place. This organizes things very nicely. Maybe it keeps it into different work groups, different companies you have. Lots of different ways to break this up, but a very nice way to keep things pretty clean. And that also lets us scale out to millions of topics, which I can't imagine that being in one single list. That would be pretty painful to go, oh, let me list all the topics. Oh, I forgot I have a million. That's not a fun place to be. So we talk about messages. Well, we've got to send stuff around. Let's call it a message. You could call it whatever you want, but that's the official term. It's the basic unit that we're sending around. Most important thing to most people is the value, the actual data, the payload that I want to send somewhere. There's a lot of stuff around that, but I need this data to go somewhere and I'll send it around. By default, I could just send raw bytes around. That's a great way. Maybe you've encrypted it. Maybe the applications on both sides are doing their own thing. Sure, that's fine. But I could do things like string, I could do JSON, Avro, protobuf, and those things may follow a very table-oriented manner. They have field names, they have types, they have nullability. Let's create a schema. Oh, now we got to start up a schema registry. No, fortunately, Pulsar has a schema registry for me. Very easy to use. You could push schemas in there independently or have your apps do it for you. I'll show you how I'm doing that with one of my Java producers. Key, very good thing to have. We use that for a number of reasons. If you have some kind of key that makes sense for your data, please set this. This is very helpful when you're trying to track down data, partition it, maybe if things are being compacted. No reason not to set a key. Now you might have other properties, metadata you want to send around with your payload without disturbing that or changing the payload. Get at as many of these key value properties as reasonable. You don't want to put a million things in there, but put some properties that might make sense for you or might link to other systems, whatever makes sense. Who's making these messages? It might come up with a default name. We'll see that in some of the messages around. It's nice to have a unique producer name, helpful for yourself, helpful if we want to make sure we don't have duplicates. Nice thing to have. Again, sequence. Again, if we're going to have some kind of ordering, better have some kind of sequence. Again, help you to make sure we don't have duplicates because sometimes the data can be the same. I've got a device here reading temperature. The temperature shouldn't be varying that much sitting in the same place doing nothing unless my server really start getting hot here. And I am running a lot of things on there, but we'll see. If things start heating up, we'll take a look at the chart again and we can watch some of these numbers go up. So we have somebody's making data and somebody's consuming it. Very often that could be the same application. They could be totally unrelated. They could be on the same machine, could be on different cloud hosting environments. One could be this tiny device here. One could be a server. Someone produces the data and that's it. They get it out there. They get an act back saying it's confirmed. We're good. It went into a topic somewhere, again, under that, tenant namespace setup. So only people who want that get it. Someone consumes that data, they subscribe to it. They point to that data they want and they get it. What's nice is they don't have to know where that event is stored. They don't have to know who produced it. They don't have to know much about it. They may want to know the schema. They may want to know the type, but they don't need to know who produced it, which is nice because here it came from MQTT. I'm not using MQTT to consume it, but I could. I'm just using it as if it's a regular Pulsar message. Don't have to know the difference. Don't have to care where it came from or where it's going. That's up to everyone who's using the data, which could be as many as you want. We talked about topics and messages. Brokers are those pieces in Pulsar you saw. Make sure they do the routing, do the connections for you, keep all that handling. So they're doing a lot of computations, but not doing much storage, maybe a little cache here. Subscriptions, we name them so people know how I get the data. What's nice, those can be shared. So if I have 100 servers are just waiting for me to push data to them, and they're just going to do something to them, maybe it's execute something, maybe it's just store it, order doesn't matter. That's great. Have as many consumers on that same subscription as you want. And they just get the messages, do what they want with them. Couple different options for subscribing to data. Now, this is important depending on what your use case is. Now, obviously, you never wrote an app before. You could just go with shared, and who cares? You probably only have one person producing the data, one person reading it. Doesn't matter. I'm just keep sending messages. There's no real rhyme or reason to them. If it's something like CDC, that order is really important. You may want exclusive. Now, failover is very similar, but hey, maybe your consumer is down and you don't want to wait till it restarts. Let me have use failover, and someone will take over when that guy is not available. Again, you make that decision when you set it up. Very nice option there. Shared, everyone read it. Don't care the order, just get me that data. Key shared, we kind of split the difference. You don't want a bunch of people consuming it, but they're doing it on a key. So you keep things in an order for that key. Again, the importance of that key. And maybe this is, okay, I want this particular table to always go to this consumer, hands it in order. Good option there. Again, depends on your use case, what you're trying to do, but a nice option to have. Sometimes, you can have a guarantee on this ordering. If you have a single topic or a partition, we can partition topics like Kafka does. Then you can easily set up an ordering guarantee. If you have different partitions, by default, you do not have a guarantee there. You set up a subscription mode, single consumer can get things from the same partition in order. Again, we mentioned that failover exclusive, pretty much the same thing, but just having that backup. You can have it in order. Again, we mentioned with those keys shared, depending on how you're going to work with keys, but then you're going to need keys in your data, something you've got to add on to that. Very important. Now, sometimes, you don't want to have to do too much, but I want to get data in and out of there. Maybe by default, you just use shared. Again, you could decide that later once you start getting data flowing through your system to get a feeling of what your use cases are. Lots of different ways to get data in and out of Pulsar, which is pretty important if you're going to use this as your unified messaging platform. So there's libraries, and I'm going to show you examples in Java, Python, and Go, and C# and WebSockets. We've got a pretty cool one in Scala, and I was going to do the Node.js one, but it's a short meetup. Maybe the next one in person will let people pick their language of choice. Lots of options there. There's a pretty cool feature. If you've used stored procedures before, something like Kafka streams, we've got a lightweight stream processing built into Pulsar. You write a function, deploy it, and it runs is either a process connected to your broker, or it can be running in something like function mesh or in Kubernetes. Lots of different ways to have these deployed. They handle all that extra work you might have to do. Now, it's not a ton of work, but this makes it so easy. This is like, say, AWS Lambda. I just write a bit of functionality, import a library, have a very simple deploy script, and this subscribes to a topic just like any other consumer, but you don't have to set up any of that overhead to do it. You put a function there, maybe connect it with a context if you need it from Pulsar to let you know what's going on, especially if you want to do things like have accumulators or things like that. Have code come in when a message arrives, does something with it, and then does some output. Maybe that goes to a different topic or multiple topics, or uses it to maybe decide where data should be routed. You could do some interesting things and functions. Right now, the languages support are Java, Python, and Golang. Pretty good set of options, all run pretty fast. Now, sometimes you don't want to write any code, and I can't blame you. If you want to do something simple like, listen to Twitter and then drop that data into an InfluxDB, just use some of the sources and syncs we have out there in the Pulsar IO framework. Very easy to install. Download them from the hub or directly from GitHub and drop them in there. It's a NAR file, just like in Nifi. Set a little bit of connectivity information up, and it'll just start consuming or producing from a topic on that data stream. Very nice way to do that. similar to Kafka Connect. And in the newest version, we also support Kafka Connect as part of this. So you got a lot of options for getting data in and out, some cool stuff from Debezium. Good way to get your data in and out without having to write a ton of code. Just set some configuration. Protocol handlers, we mentioned this before. This is one of those really interesting, unique features of Pulsar. I don't have to use the Pulsar protocol. Certainly, as you see up here on the cool drawing is, yeah, we have that in there, and that's a great way to get your data in and out. But we've got Kafka people out there. You might already have Kafka apps, another Kafka cluster, and you'd like to get that data to Pulsar so other people can share it. We can have Kafka producers just send us the data. We also have connectors for Kafka as well. If you want to have the cluster pull that in for you. Also support MQTT, which is I'm using on my little devices here, so I don't have to, put any libraries on there or change anything. Just point to a different broker. Runs on standard ports. Again, you can configure that. Same thing. We got support for AMQP, RabbitMQ there. RocketMQ, and it's an open source adapter there, so you could add your own handlers as need be. So if there's something you have already and you want to move it over, you could do that. Now, very closely connected but not built in. You want to write processing against Pulsar, very common. There's really good connectors out there for Pulsar, for Flink, Spark, and out of the box, Pulsar SQL, which under the covers is Presto or Trino. And I'll show you doing some of that. It's a really nice way to be able to interact using frameworks that you might know already. The Pulsar SQL one is really straightforward. Data offloaders are how we do the tiered storage. And you just plug them in, have it extend how much storage you can have for your messages. So you don't have to worry, are my bookkeeper node's going to get too big, and that could be really expensive disk space there. Let me do it to S3 a lot cheaper. You don't have to worry about how much space do I have? Well, S3. And what's nice is the processing engines, the consumers, they could still access that data. They don't have to know that it's not in that immediate storage. I could reach the first message from the first time I use the system, store it forever in S3, and just access that back via Pulsar SQL as part of a query. No problem. Very nice there. We mentioned schemas, very common to use. Most common ones are there with Avro, Protobuf, and JSON. Schema registry runs as part of the Pulsar cluster. You don't have to worry about any kind of add-ons. It's very well integrated, used by Flink SQL, used by the Pulsar SQL. Very easy for you to use it in the different consumers and producers. And it just makes an easy way to make sure that your data is what you expect it to be. So you can have that handshake, because producers and consumers may never be written by the same people. That might be different companies, different teams. Having that schema so you can all agree on, this is what my data looks like. This is the type. These are the fields. This is what is nullable. Makes it good, makes it very easy for doing things like queries. Again, that's helpful for things like Apache Nifi and Spark, and anyone who's used to that. We touched on functions before, but it is really straightforward. Input comes in from one or more topics. Your function gets activated when a message comes into it. You do some processing. It's very easy for you to send any logs right to a log topic, so you don't have to worry about writing to a disk there. Put it in a topic and someone else can process it, maybe even another function. You could do a lot there, whether you could do that with Nifi, Flink, or whatever. You could pretty much put any functions in there. For my example today, I'm doing a Python one that's calling a sentiment analysis library. Again, you could use pretty much any third-party library out there, TensorFlow, whatever. David has some pretty cool one he does there. Again, support for those 3 languages. Makes it pretty easy. A lot of different syncs there, things like JDBC or a lot of different ones. We touched on that Kafka one. Is a nice way that you can run Kafka and Pulsar together and MQTT and not really have to decide to move every single application over to one library or another. Makes it straightforward. Pulsar SQL, I'll show you how easy it is to use. Under the cover, pretty complex, but Trino and Presto, pretty powerful tool there. And you could just use it as if it was another SQL connection. I'll show you, I'm running it in a query tool. Pretty nice way to be able to get to your data without any kind of heavy lifting. Again, you don't have to know if it's in Apache Bookkeeper or it's in, tiered storage, whichever tiered storage that may be, and it runs pretty fast. I'm not running a lot of data, but you could see that scale out where you need to. I created a little diagram I use for the big demo I'm doing. I'm going to walk you through the simple demo today, and we'll go through a more complex one in the future, but I'll run this one for you, where I've got data coming in from a couple different things, different ways. I didn't mention one of the clients is WebSockets, which is a really cool way to be able to consume and produce Pulsar data. And I wrote a little web app to do that. It's kind of cool. You get your data in a couple different ways. Pulsar does what it needs to do, stores it where it needs to be stored, and interacts very easily with Flink. Again, having that option of when something's batch, when something's stream, where does it get stored? Couple of options there. Very easy to access any of this data from Spark or with Trino or from Pulsar functions. I've been dumping things into a Scilla database using the native Pulsar sync. Really simple. Just set up a simple configuration file and press deploy. Pretty easy. Now, this might look like, yeah, that's pretty cool, Tim, but can I use it for anything? Yeah, there's a lot of options. Obviously, United messaging is nice, so I don't have to think of running, well, I can put Rabbit over here, and I've got Kinesis and Kafka and ActiveMQ and MQTT, and some of them can be only on premise, some can be only in the cloud, some of them have one node, some can have multiple nodes. And how do I get all of them to speak together? Do I rewrite every app? Do I have someone consume from all of them and then manually push them somewhere else? That can get pretty messy. Not having to change much, but change what the IP address you're pointing to, or you have smart DNS. You just put in a different pointer to that, and it can point all to Pulsar, and you don't have to worry about it. Ad tech seems to be a very popular one. They need data very fast. They like to have different types of messaging, pushing data through very quickly. It's a nice fit there. Fraud detection, lots of transactions coming through a system. You want to be able to query them as they come through with things like Flink SQL, or have functions on there that are doing some analysis on there. Good use case. Connected car, you're pushing a lot of data. Same thing with IoT. Something I didn't mention is Pulsar doesn't have to be this massive cluster. It doesn't have to be, this massive thing running all these extra features you saw. It could be slimmed down and run on a small edge gateway. I've got running on a Jetson, and that could just geo replicate to my main cluster. And again, don't have to use a non-open source feature for that or some third-party software. Set up some very simple configuration, and I could geo replicate that to different cloud regions or wherever it needs to go. That works out nice for IoT, connected car, anywhere where you might want to collect data at an edge, do some processing, and then get it on its way. What's nice is if the systems are down, I could act and continue running locally and let that catch up later. Having a broker that lets me connect all different ways gives me that asynchronous disconnect between things. Makes very, very good for microservices, whether they're running externally or they're running as Pulsar functions. Microservices, a pretty good way to work with Pulsar. Now, you're not going to be the first one if you're people who've never heard of Pulsar, never used it. Lots of other companies using it. You may have heard of Splunk. Pretty big company. A lot of people use them for real-time monitoring, and they are pretty serious about Pulsar. They bought a Pulsar company. There's some features in there that are really critical to people like Splunk, where you really care about durability, you care about scalability, high availability. support for multiple languages, really robust persistence, very easy to operate, low cost of ownership, low latency, layered architecture, makes it easy to not have to scale out giant disks somewhere, and the ability to scale up to billions of messages and run that in production without worry. So Splunk is a major Pulsar user. In China, Best Pay is a large payment provider, and they are using Pulsar. Again, they like the way the storage works. They like the support for batch and streaming. They like the fact that Pulsar works really well with Spark, and it makes things pretty simple. You don't have to worry about lots of different kinds of clusters. Clusters work together really well, same to nodes. That multi-tenancy support is very nice. And having that unified architecture makes it very stable. Features you can't really complain about. Tencent, using it for a couple of use cases. Again, like we mentioned before, payments, billions of financial transactions is a very nice use case for Pulsar. Using it where I need to federate learning for machine learning, that is a growing use case. Great use for Pulsar, again, with all those different libraries, makes that nice. And gaming for, logging. Logging is a nice use case for us because we got support for a lot of different libraries and connectors there, and having that option of what you want those logs to do. And when someone like Splunk's using that for logging, gives you an idea. Pretty good use case there. Flipkart, pretty large e-commerce company, a lot of money there. They're pushing through a lot of data. They like the fact that, with Pulsar, you don't have to worry about the spikes. You don't have to manually rebalance. You don't have to worry about system failure. Yeah, we show you some of the differences from Kafka. Obviously, a lot of things look familiar for anyone using Kafka. I came from the Kafka world as well. It works with Spark, works with Flink, things common with Kafka, but there's some differences as we saw with subscription options, with the different connectors. And it also was written a little later. It also was used because it has some features that weren't part of the original design for Kafka. The support for that multi-tenancy, that separation of compute and storage, kind of important there. So you can see that, both are Apache open source, have a lot of committers there. But Pulsar has a couple of different features that make sense for a lot of people. Narvar is doing some cool stuff. Again, not having to worry about traffic spikes, not having to manually rebalance things, not have to worry about system failure. Pulsar just runs pretty solid. Let's get to the fun part. Hopefully every system in the world that I've been connected to didn't time out while we were talking and going through way too many slides. We limited this down. I had maybe 75 million slides, and now we narrowed it down to 34. So I think that we did pretty good there. Now I posted this link out. This has all the source code that I'm using for the first demo app. The other demo apps are in a ton of other GitHub repos that I have out there. If you go to the main repo that I have under Spann HW, you'll see a ton of them, lots of different use cases. If you're curious, just definitely post it in there and you'll see something. Obviously, a difference with Kafka is different command line tools. Same idea though. I've got a command line interface. I've got a REST interface. People have built pretty cool management consoles on top of it. And there's some vendors that supply them as well, including StreamNative. So you've got a couple of different ways to, manage your data there, whether you're using DevOps or, you're starting off today and you're just going to build your own cluster. You can go to Pulsar Apache org, download a zip file. Right now we're in 291 or a tar.gz, untar it. If you've got Java on your system already and you're running Mac, Windows, any of the Linuxes, you got more than, say, a gig of RAM, you just bin Pulsar space standalone, starts a simple one node cluster for you, has all the features. You type Pulsar SQL Worker start, and then you'll have the SQL interface too. And you could do the same running it in Docker. And I'll give you the links to everything if you want to set up your own Docker cluster. Or you could just go to StreamNative console if you want to run your own from the cloud without having to do a ton of heavy lifting. You know, a lot of people don't want to have to manually download something and type 4 or 5 commands, but it's pretty straightforward, pretty easy for you to be able to do that without, being the hardest thing in the world. So next up, so we've got a cluster running, and we could do this on Kubernetes, and you could download our platform if you want to do it on your own in Kubernetes. Pretty straightforward way to do that. So what we do is, like we mentioned here and here, create my tenant. Again, if it's security and you have permissions, if you download the standalone, you have permissions to do this. You don't have to worry. I'm answering this live on the difference from Kafka. I'll try to point out things that you'll notice right away aren't in Kafka. And the first two here is I'm creating a tenant. Don't have that in Kafka. Namespaces, don't have that. And here I'm creating my namespace under that tenant I just created. I can take a look and see what tenants we have. I'll just go to a command line interface here, everyone's favorite, and you could just run it. The same thing can be done with a REST API or through, a fancy console here. It's a little easier if you're navigating through something like this, but you get the idea, whether you're doing a command line or something else. Lots of options there. I can check out my namespaces. I can create a topic. This again is a difference between Kafka. Similar idea here. I would set up partitions if I need to partition it, but by default, I need to decide if it's persistent. Again, Kafka, you don't have a choice. Most people will make persistent topics, but maybe you don't need it. Maybe it's something that's sending messages constantly, and most of the messages are, it's okay, it's okay. And you don't care if you lose a couple, and don't make it persistent, make things faster. Don't store it if you don't need to, but I tend to almost always have it persistent, get our tenant in there, our namespace and the name of the topic. I create that, and then I can see all the topics I have. Oops, showing ahead there. And I only have one topic here because I just created one for the meetup. You could create as many as you want, literally tens of thousands. So we can start producing data. We've got a tenant, we got a namespace, we got a topic, it's ready to go. I could just start consuming it. Simplest way, similar to Kafka, I could do it from the command line. We've got a client available if you install it, pretty straightforward. And I'm just gonna consume from this topic, as you see here, just displaying it. I put it here to just keep going. You could have it run for just a couple, depending on what you want to do. So we could start producing a couple messages here. And there's a lot of different ways to do it. I am doing this one in Go. Let me show you the code. Again, this is all in source code, but just to give you an idea. The Go code is pretty straightforward. I'm not a Go expert, so don't look at my Go code and say that looks like garbage. It probably does, but it works. So I've got access to my library here, connect to my cluster. Again, could be a whole bunch of security options here, depending on what you need. If I can't connect, we'll just log an error. Here, I create my producer against that topic, and I'm just going to send this message here. Compiling stuff with Go is pretty easy. If we look at the build, I already built it. It built this little app, and we could just run it here. Pretty straightforward. If we looked in that other area, here's that message. Again, doesn't matter that Go produced it. Python, the command line shell is reading it. Pretty straightforward. Whatever you want to do there is pretty easy. Get that redraw right. So I've got a couple examples here. So we just saw Go. Pretty easy to use Go. Let's produce a message with Python. How hard is that? Well, it's even easier. Import Pulsar. we just do a pip install on that to Pulsar-client, and that'll get you set up there. It does some heavy lifting. If you're on a weird platform that's not Ubuntu, not Red Hat, not Mac, not Windows, maybe it's a weird architecture, you might have to compile it. If you're going to compile it, you compile the C++ one, and then I'll have the Python there as well. The Python one and the Node.js one use the C++ library. If you're a C++ developer, pretty awesome. Gives you a really fast way to do that. But I've been impressed how fast the Go one is. And again, the Java one's nothing to sneeze at. All these are pretty quick. So this is about as easy as you can get to produce messages. I'm just going to send it here. I'm not using any schema. Again, simplest use case. Put a string, encode it, send it. And it's pretty easy to run this. Just running it. I sent a message. We've got debug info on so you can see what's going on. See how it connected. Sent the message. We've got someone consuming it. We can run that as well. Let me show you the consume Meetup code here in Python. Pretty straightforward. Here we're just going to loop through it for this use case. Lots of different ways to read and consume the data. As you might expect, we're consuming here, waiting for more data. Send another Go one, got another Go one. You get the idea there. Pretty easy to get data into or out from. We just saw Python. We saw from command line shell script. We saw from Go. Over here is our mighty Presto, SQL, Trino, Pulsar SQL, and that's running on my same box here. I'm looking at the UI so I can see the different queries that I've run and some of the metadata, like how long it took, that sort of thing. That's nice to have from Presto to see what's going on there. Also, if I forget what query I want to run, I go back here and see the history, take a look. I'm curious what this one is. So here, this was a query looking at this data. Because this data, you saw I sent it as UTF-8. So I put this little nice Presto helper there to convert that to human readable format. Off to my StreamNative hosted cluster. As step-by-step walkthrough a video. Okay, yeah, there is a good walkthrough on this. There is a good video, and there is an awesome, there's a very awesome Pulsar Slack group. I'm hoping someone can add that so you can see that. There is a little steps. I'll find I have a good example code that shows you how to set that off. There's a couple of different options how you want to authenticate. If you go through the command, through the web shell, you can see how you could download the files there. Pretty straightforward. Thanks, Karen. You'll put it in there and you'll be able to see it, but it's pretty straightforward. Now, I think I probably have an example here I could show you real quick on one of my 500 machines here. Let me take a look if I've got an example here. Let's see. That one have it. Oh, take too much time. We'll take a look. One of these have it. One of these guys has the might be on. Oh, it's probably this guy. Yeah, let me go there real quick. I just want to show you it is pretty straightforward, but we have that well documented in the Slack group. I'll send you all the example code, either that or David will, and we'll make sure you have that. I just want to see if I have this somewhere for you. Yeah, here you go. So you download, you have to set your service URL. Again, if you're using StreamNative, there's ways to copy all this and download the pieces you need. Pretty straightforward. Not the most difficult thing in the world. You get that downloaded config file here if you want to go with the private key, and you're setting a couple of parameters that you send into your code here. This one is the Java code. So I'll show you that right now, because why not? Let me show you the Java code. Get up my IDE here. Tim is using OAuth. Yes, I like OAuth. I don't know if that's everyone's favorite. Yeah, but there's example code out there, pretty easy to do. In this Java one, I have passing in all that information, credentials, the issuer, the service URL, and we just authenticate that method. There's a couple of other ones. Yeah, David has some great examples out there in his source code, and we've got them in the StreamNative examples. There's a couple different ways to do it. Usually for people intro to Pulsar, you're using your own Docker one or a Pulsar standalone, and you haven't set up all that because it's a little extra work, but it's not too hard, especially OAuth. I really like how easy it is to do OAuth compared to how it's been in the past. Pretty easy to link there. Doing the same thing in Nifi, which someone asked about before. So you show you Nifi. While I'm in the Java code, again, all of it on GitHub. Pretty easy, same idea we had before. Here we're just doing that login, but I put the URLs to connect to the cluster. Make sure we're connected to that cluster. Here I'm setting a key. I set my own producer name, and we mentioned the schemas. It's pretty easy to do schemas in Java. So here I'm just using the method from JSON schema to turn this class here into my schema. And I've got a very simple Java bean that just has all the fields I have with their types. Pretty easy. So I don't have to explicitly build it. And I know that it worked because I'm sending the data there. And I just produce my message with that class there. Set my key there. I create my own key with UUID. You could use whatever you want for a key. Maybe your data has it. I send that class there. Boom. Put a little debug stuff there. Ready to go. Pretty straightforward to do it from Java. Just to show you that login. Can I make it bigger? Oh, yes. Always hard to see this. Let's see. I know there's a presentation mode, but it gets a little weird when I do that, but we're going to try that. That looks no bigger. Oh, here we go. Hopefully that's a little bigger. And again, I'll have all the source code in GitHub so you can see it, but hopefully this is big enough. On my monitor, it's huge. So it's hard to think of what it's going to look like on Zoom, especially if you're on a phone or something. It could be like tiny. So I'll send out the GitHub links to all this so you could actually get your hands on it, run it, do what you need to do there. But setting authentication, pretty straightforward. It depends on which way you're doing. Obviously, OAuth is pretty simple. And right from a StreamNative cloud, you go to the site and download that. Pretty straightforward. Not the most difficult thing in the world. You may have to figure out where you want to put that file. That's up to you. Let's get it out of this mode here. I'm just showing a little bit of code here just to give you an idea, but we'll have all that code in the in different GitHubs. Again, if you go under all my sub GitHubs, you'll see that. And there's links to a lot of stuff. If you join the Slack group, we can go through a ton of that. But this is the simple idea. Get the data in there and then do what you want. Again, here's the queries I'm using. Pretty straightforward to query things with Pulsar SQL. If you want to see the stats, and a lot of people do, they're available from REST endpoints. They're available from admin tool. Depends on what your interest is there. Lots of different ways to see what's going on with the data. Obviously, you could tie that in with the DevOps system, tie it in with other tools and use this. Or I could send this data to Pulsar and use that as my channel for distributing, information about Pulsar, however you want to do that. So we ran our queries here. Now I have another query that I wanted to show you. Looking at the cluster here, I see this query here from this particular table. why I like this one is we'll show you something different. This one has a schema. So the first thing you'll notice right away is I don't see key, my own funky value or those internal fields unless I want to see them. I could see the actual fields from the message because it knows what that schema is, because we have that shared schema there. So that makes it important if you want to query this data with Pulsar SQL like we showed you here, or if you want to query it with Spark, you want to query it with whatever other tool there, lots of different SQL options there. Now, with that Pulsar SQL, the Presto, again, this tool, this may be way too small too. I don't know how much bigger I can make this one, but just to give you an idea of, is this help us? It's a little bigger. This is just another way I could query any of the data in the topics. And it's pretty straightforward. I just grab, we saw that tenant namespace underneath there are those topics that look like tables. And from here, I could just query them, whether that's has a lot of specific columns like you see here, because I have a schema. And it still has those metadata ones for key and producer name and sequence. But it has, if you don't have a schema, you just have a value and those metadata ones. But very easy for you to use this to query your data, or, point to Presto with, say, a JDBC driver and use that in your app if you don't want to use messaging semantics. A couple of options there. Now, if you're a Spark person, pretty easy to do Spark. I've got a command line Spark SQL set up here, and I made a connection to a topic. And here I've got the schema displayed. Again, this is the schema of the Spark table. I didn't set up a schema for our chat here, but here I have the code. I'm going to run a simple query. Let's get over to Spark, run that query. And this is waiting for data to come in. Now, I said I'm going to show you a little different way to get data in with a little more advanced app, as opposed to that pretty simple one. This app is my little web page. And for in-person meetups, I'm going to use this to let people give me questions, as opposed to have to use Zoom, which we want to have in person. So, you could just connect to this on your phone. I'd be running it in the venue, and you could ask a question like someone asked, how does Pulsar differ from Kafka? And this is a Meetup user. And I send that over there. Let's take a look at what's going on behind the scenes. Looks like this is just a regular single page application. Underneath the covers here, I'm making calls, and you can see the network calls happening that are happening over WebSockets. And then as that data comes in, it gets sent to Pulsar topic. I'm sending that over WebSockets, get source codes out there. And then down here is separate from that top form. This is consuming from another topic. And the reason why I consume from another topic is I've got a Pulsar function that reads that original chat, and then it does sentiment analysis on it and push it out to another topic. And that topic down here is the one we're reading. And the Spark is doing a micro batch against the topic, and it's getting that value here that the function put out, and it's returning the sentiment. No real sentiment there. We're just asking a question. How are they different? And that just shows up in Spark. If I had it in Flink, it would show up in Flink. However you want to do it, very straightforward. But it makes for an interesting application that I can send data to Pulsar and consume it without any special libraries, without really much code. The JavaScript is really simple here. And I'll give you access to that source code, but really comes down to this line here. Can I make that bigger? Oh, I can. Yay. So I'm just connecting to my topic. Again, if you had, login information or authentication, you could do that, especially OAuth. And I'm just doing the WebSocket connection here. I'm a consumer. Again, that persistent you saw, tenant, namespace, topic, create a subscription. What kind of subscription? What's in my queue? And this is just going to run in the background through jQuery and just populate this table I have. And I just add more rows to the table as they come in. So that's a pretty easy way to do a web application without being someone who really knows, front end web development super well. But with the data table library, pretty easy to have a big way to display data. And if you don't want to send data there, you don't have to. It could be just displaying data that you have already, or load it from some other way. Great way to do visualizations. And I could use that same library and say a Jupyter notebook or some other way, so I don't have to worry about installing special libraries. Again, getting data in and out of Pulsar, very flexible, very easy. We mentioned Nifi before. That's part of my flippin stack. And David wrote a really nice connector there. Hopefully I didn't lose my connection. Yeah. Nifi likes to time people out for security purposes, which is nice. But if you're not concerned with security purposes, it's kind of a pain that things time out. Lots of different ways to connect to Pulsar. Let's zoom in here. Nifi's got its own built-in zoom, which is nice. Nifi is different from Airflow. As you see here, it's graphical and it's designed to, kind of be the helper for things like Pulsar and Flink. Do that initial cleanup of your data, routing, do that in a very fast, scalable way, but do it graphical, do it very solid, and run down to a small node if you need to. This is grabbing data as JSON, converting it to JSON. Now we could convert it to anything that looks like a record, Avro, Parquet, but JSON's a nice one for Pulsar. I connect to my Pulsar server here. We've got a connection pool here to this server. Again, if I had different authentication, we would connect here, change it, whether it's OAuth or JWT or something else. We have SSL, all those sort of things. Get the data there, and here I could start pushing through that data. What's nice with Nifi is in between each step, there's a configurable queue. So, when I'm pausing my data, I'm not losing it. Nice feature here. It's a nice way to communicate data in and out of Pulsar or other things. I use it a lot for grabbing the REST data. Here I'm invoking the REST endpoint from the Meetup, getting a little data in JSON format from that API, and then you could send it back to Pulsar just to give you a different way to access that data. Lots of options there. Let's see if we had any more questions there. Yeah, so we had that question on authentication. There's a bunch of different ways to do it. We probably should go through how you want to do that in the Slack. So just ping me or David in the Slack, or just put a general request out there, and we'll make sure we get back to you. I don't want you not getting your answer there. Yeah, sometimes docs are hard to follow. They are being rewritten, which is awesome. But yeah, we've got some resources to help you there. But suffice to say, it's pretty straightforward here. And they also give you some examples here. If you go to the client section on the cloud, they'll show you how to do different connectivity to your stuff here. Regardless. Yeah, don't use Addison. I use mine. I don't want to steal stuff. And pretty straightforward. They give you examples of how to do it with Golang, which we showed you before, or Java, or C++ here, or from the command line. Pretty straightforward. Obviously, the best way to start is start testing from the command line, see how things work. Make sure you're getting data that you expect there. It's table stakes, make sure things are in the place that you think. And if you think there's a schema or there's not a schema, for the basic things, I'd say start off with no schema, but then when it's time, add your schema there, and then you could start using it. It's pretty helpful if you got enough messages there. Depends what you're doing there, just to give you an idea. So we went through the basic demo. Now there's a couple of things. We still have Python. Oh, I didn't show you the C#. Let's do the C# real quick. This is it. There's one library I'm using, the .pulsar one. And if I want to produce data there, include my imports there. Got docs here. I'll post this one. Connect to that same topic, same cluster, produce it. What's nice with the C# one, it wants to be very asynchronous. So there's a lot of stuff going on there. But I try to keep this as simple as possible. Produce it out here. Here I'm just putting in a date. I'll put it in some JSON just because I like JSON. Added a property, do my send. Here, very simple. I'm running this on a Mac. I've been impressed. You could do C# on a Mac. Do my build. When that's done, I could do my run. I could also, how about .NET? I could do my run here. And if you look down here, after I do my produce of data, I'm consuming it here. And you can see I got some of those records from Golang. I got one from Python. I got its own message here. It's pretty cool. So if I want to produce some from Go, I could go check that out over here. And those have already come over here. If I want to produce them from, yeah, and again, the ones I did in the chat showing up in my Spark app. So you got a lot of different options, how you're getting that data coming in and out of the system, whether that's coming from Python, whether it's coming from Java, Go, C#, Node.js, Scala, Rust, or, coming to or from Spark. Can we see that SQL running? Yeah. And you can see, how we're doing this very simple reading from Spark over here, or we could read that same data with Pulsar SQL. Depends what we want to do there. Lots of options. Again, see a reason why to set a key. So I know this one came from C#. Maybe I should have put C# code, whatever makes sense there. Lots of options. Let's go back to the slides. Do we see some more? Oh, is service registration like Zookeeper required? Did I not show what? I don't think I showed one that has with Pulsar. We actually have Zookeeper right now in the current. I don't have that architecture. I got rid of one too many slides. Sometimes you take out a slide. You should have kept that one in. I think I deleted that one. With that one, we were showing as part of your clustered environment, we have Zookeeper. And that it does all that service discovery metadata for us. In a future version, you'll be able to take that out or plug in a different mechanism to do that kind of stuff for you. Again, very simple way for doing keeping that separate from the bookkeeper nodes and from the Pulsar nodes. Now, I'm looking at this question that says, is service registration like Zookeeper required? We do have Zookeeper as part of this. It will be replaced. Do you mean service registration as part of the brokers, or do you mean for the functions or for some other purposes? There is probably a couple things here. Oh, David's got a good thing there. Yes. Alternative metadata stores. That sounds fancy. Now, I'll post all these links. Can I grab these? Some of them are more useful than others, but just put them out there so you have them. And we'll be releasing all these slides. So I should have said that before, in case you're like, oh, screenshot that one. Now, we will have them and we'll have those mailed out to you so you'll be able to get them and not have to worry about it. So you'll be able to get any of those. If you want to see some cool stuff well, I think it's cool. Every week I put my own independent newsletter out on LinkedIn. Talks about Pulsar, Flink, Nifi, Spark, some other open source stuff. Also put links to cool tools that I find, random ones sometimes, unrelated to Pulsar, but hey, here's a cool way to parse JSON in the command line. That kind of stuff is cool to me, so I put it in there. Yeah, so you could see some pretty cool features coming in a very near term, and we'll have some announcements on those, which are really, really helpful. We'll hopefully soon, very soon. And this is, the hours may be a little weird for my friends in New Jersey here, but we have a summit coming up in Asia. It's virtual. I have a talk or two there. I think David does too, and it's in a weird hour, but I know that'll be recorded and show up on YouTube. But if you're around in a couple of days, wouldn't hurt to go take a look at it. There's a lot of interesting people speaking, some in English, some not. So you'll have to see, but there should be slides of everything coming out as well. I'm talking at a couple of events very shortly, some this month, some early next month. Data Minutes is kind of interesting. 50 different talks, each of them like 10, 15 minutes. And that's another virtual one. Speaking at DevFest, I was hoping to be there, but I'm going to be virtual on that one. That's coming up end of the month. Early next month, doing a talk at Developer Week. This one has switched to all virtual. We'll have a booth there. We'll have some giveaways. David will be talking about some cool stuff. We'll probably have copies of the books available. And then a couple days later, I'm talking at the Scylla Summit on how to combine Pulsar and Scylla, which is ridiculously easy. If people want to see that, I'll show you the one line of code to do it. I have it running on Docker on my cluster, and it's just one sync to push all that chat data right into Scylla table. Scylla, if you don't know, is Cassandra compatible, very fast, and has a really cool logo. I kind of like that logo. If you're very interested in doing some Pulsar stuff for StreamNative, but you're happy where you're working, that's awesome. Reach out. We're looking for ambassadors around the world, and there's some cool perks there for any of our Pulsar people. And again, if you don't know Pulsar, pretty easy to start, especially if you know Kafka already, or RabbitMQ or Kinesis. There's just some new features there, not a massive thing. It'd be awesome if you've got any kind of background in Pulsar, you want to take the user survey. Even if you just saw it only today, user survey is very helpful. Again, if you've got complaints, put them in there so we fix it. If we don't know, can't change it. If you want to know more, learn more, we've got pretty cool on-demand training. We don't mention in there, which is important to people like me. It's free, so you don't have to pay for it. And there's access to some clusters there, different libraries, build your first app. It's pretty nice. Again, if you have any comments on that, if you've tried it already, if you kind of got partially in there and you're like, I got stuck, definitely join the Slack group or contact me or David on either on a StreamNative Slack or in GitHub, Twitter, LinkedIn. You'll see me. I'm around. Or I think even open a ticket in GitHub for me. I don't care. Just we want to make sure you get through there and have a good experience with the training. We also have live ones. The hours may be a little tough depending on where you are. For my New Jersey people, you couldn't ask for better timing. And that one's coming up really soon. This one, David goes extremely deep. And he wrote the book. So that's a really good way. If you want to start building apps quickly, 3 days of your time, especially on Eastern time, pretty good hours there. Not bad for Europe either. So definitely join there. I know there's a couple of spots still open. Good way to get some in-depth training and really learn what you're doing. Yes. Yeah, Tim Spann loves GitHub issues. So yeah, keep putting them out there. I got nothing better to do. Or contact me on Twitter. people don't harass me too much. So I have most of my direct messagings open. So one of those three are great ways to get in touch. Otherwise, again, the Slack out there is a great resource. Ton of committers on there, ton of other people there. People have probably seen your problem. Go into the Slack. People are friendly. Not like you don't have 40 different Slacks open at once anyway, like me. So good time to join that. If you got any more questions, now's the time. Otherwise, ask me next week at the next thing. But great time to ask questions. I have time to show you a couple other things. Otherwise, look for some more questions. There's a lot of links we posted in there. So still got room, copy those down. This is recorded. You'll get that. You'll get the slides. You get 10,000 GitHubs, probably more than you ever wanted. And I have links to all the talks I've done in the last year or so that make those things available. Go to my talks and you can see a whole bunch of stuff, more than you've ever wanted, and more source code than you're ever going to want to look at in your life, but it's out there. This is the source code to do a Java version of sentiment analysis. They're all out there if you're interested. Oh, look at that. That's a pretty cool one. If you do the user survey, you could win the prize. Very nice. And it's helpful to build things. If you're interested enough to come, just fill out the survey. You'll learn some things you haven't thought of just looking at the different questions there. And then you can, go from there. I'm in that Scylla database just to show you what I have going on by default. Just running a query here. This is taking everything we have from this online chat app. And when I add new ones, it's just adding it to the data. Just another way to, show you how instantly we get data in the system. There was 139 rows before. Now we got 160 because I hit enter a lot. I probably shouldn't let you submit the same thing 30 times in a row. Before I put it out there, that might be something to think about. Think about before. I still got that Spark running, so it's getting all those messages as well. Again, you could run these apps pretty straightforward. Now with the configuration to get stuff into Scylla, it's pretty easy. I just want to show you that real quick while no one's asking me questions. That's my whole thing. If there's login stuff, it'd be in there as well. But just the IP and ports, key space table, key name column, boom. Sends everything that goes into the topic that I sent there into Scylla for me. Very easy to do. I don't have to do too much work. That's all it takes to deploy. Boom. Make sure I have a topic, point to a file, point to a topic, name it, go. Very straightforward. Any other questions? Otherwise, I think we'll probably wrap it up. Big thanks to David and Karen and Alicia and everyone who made this easy. Because normally me trying to run this, if you were in some of my old meetups and I'm trying to dial 40 things by myself, not quite as easy. This is much easier. So thanks for the whole team here being very awesome.
All right. Yeah, I think that pretty much wraps it up. I think we left enough time for people to ask any questions. So again, that concludes today's virtual meetup. Again, a big thank you to Tim, our speaker, for such an informative presentation. And thank you all of us. Thank you all of you for joining us today.
Everyone.
If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to a member of our team or Tim, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. As Tim mentioned earlier, in the resources, if you have 10 minutes after the webinar, please help the community learn what the priorities are for the Pulsar project. Take the 2022 Apache Pulsar survey. And if you include your email at the end, you'll be entered to win a $50 gift card. So that's exciting. Again, everyone will be receiving a copy of the recording along with the deck and the resources and links mentioned today, hopefully by next week. Again, thank you everyone and Tim for the presentation. And thank you for joining our virtual meetup. Have a great rest of the evening.
Thank you.